Well, we welcome everyone to today's Focus Forum. Welcome to our forum. We have our presenters online and we have people checking in who have pre-registered. Welcome to this Focus Forum. I am Bob Haley, the Vice President for Focus Greater Syracuse, and delighted to have you with us today. Our topic today is designing a community grid for all, an introduction to a pivotal and new community visioning and planning effort about to begin in Syracuse. This effort is to look forward to what we want the city to be, to complement the DOT ID1 community grid engineering projects that are about to start construction. We have three experienced panelists who will speak on the topic of planning for diverse communities. They will be formally introduced in a moment. As usual, we are scheduled for 1 hour and we are recording this session. After being introduced, our panelists will each make a brief presentation, followed by a Q&A. We begin the Q&A with questions received ahead of time from you viewers who have checked in and registered. And you can also, if you wish, place questions in the chat and we'll get to as many of them as time permits. Now we are very pleased to turn this over to our moderator, Sharon Owens, Deputy Mayor for the City of Syracuse, to introduce our panelists. Sharon?
Good morning, and thank you, Bob, and thank you to everyone that is viewing and here with us today. As Bob mentioned, we are at the cusp of a generational transformational moment here in the City of Syracuse that will not only affect the Center City, but our community as a whole in Central New York. And I am so pleased to be here with this amazing panel of individuals, including our good partner in this venture for many, many years, Bob Haley. Also, Joe Driscoll. So happy to have Joe on board on the proverbial other side of the table, working with the administration as our I-81 project director. And he, as with everything, has hit the ground running. Our team from Dover Kohl, so happy. We're panning out to see the wider team. We have Josh on the split screen. So glad to see you all here. We went through an extensive RFP process, got to meet these good folks, among other submitters to and responders to our RFP. And I am without question know that we picked the best partner to really help us move forward on here. So pleased to have you all aboard, and Brian Hope, who will be the moderator for the Q&A. I have the easy moderator task. Brian is going to do the second half. I'm just going to start really quickly talking about just kind of setting the stage here. I think one of the things that I wanted to make sure that I did, and I'm also the timekeeper, and I'm going to keep myself on time as well, is to kind of lay the landscape. We've been talking about this project for well over 10 years, and it is really confusing sometimes to just understand the lay of the land and who are the players and what are their roles. And when I was asked just to take a couple minutes to kind of talk about this project, other than what we're going to get into and just the nuts and bolts of how we move forward as a community in an equitable manner, is maybe to lay out just kind of who is who and what is their role. And so, the City of Syracuse, of course, is the governing body for the municipality of Syracuse, myself, the mayor, Joe now on the team, Greg Lowe, who has been taking the lead on 81 for us, is really the entity that is going to be coordinating with all partners in this project, and particularly the DOT, to try as hard as we can and be as efficient as possible to streamline the process and to minimize the effect on your day-to-day lives as you are living in and visiting and doing business in the City of Syracuse. Onondaga County, our counterparts on this government side, will also be coordinating efforts around contracting and infrastructure work, which is their bellywag. With the city, we really are going to ensure that we're coordinating communication to our community around the different phases of the project, as well as the traffic patterns that will change as we get into this process. The DOT is the manager of the project. So all aspects of the contract letting out, how the construction is going to happen, the design process regarding the actual implementation of the construction is the responsibility of the DOT, and they answer to the Federal Highway Administration. Leave our guests to the end, but other players that you've heard when you think about this is as two stars are aligning in a couple areas. One is the DOT project and the I-81, 481, 690 interchange connections and all the city infrastructure that connects with all of that. But also, stars aligning at the very same time is the Housing Authority's redevelopment of its almost 1,700 units adjacent to the 81 viaduct in the southern end of our city. And understanding that they are two distinct projects, but very much connected. The Syracuse Housing Authority is the owner and operator of the residential units, and as an authority, the owner of the land. They actually own the land that their property sits on. They are governed by the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and so are responsible to that federal government entity regarding their redevelopment processes. And I'm sure you all have some questions I hope that I could be able to give you some insight to, but understanding that Bill Simmons, the executive director, is the ultimate expert in that area. You hear the name Blueprint 15. I have two hats. Well, I have more than two, but Blueprint is another hat. So I sit as the board president of Blueprint 15. The area of the housing that we talk about, we really wanted to honor the 15th Ward historically. So we talk about the project as the new 15th Ward, just in honor and reverence to that 15th Ward neighborhood. The neighborhood that we're looking that the Housing Authority will be redeveloping isn't technically the 15th Ward, it's an expansion of that. Blueprint 15 as a purpose-built community organization network affiliate is working to ensure that there is equitable inclusion of residents, that their voices are heard, that we are partners in really looking at design of the units. We're looking at how infrastructure can connect to the housing, and we're looking at how we can, through three pillars of the purpose-built model, look at housing, look at cradle to college education, and look at health equity, all along the same lines. And so Blueprint 15 is looking at all three of those areas at the same time. Of course, the housing has been taking the greatest notice. And then last, but certainly not least, is before I get to Dover Kohl, two more entities that I want to shout out here and to give their flowers right now. The Urban Jobs Task Force. When we look at I-81, $2.2 billion project, how do we ensure that local people work on that job? The organization, without question, that has been laser focused on that question and holding the city, the county, and the Department of Transportation accountable for ensuring that we have local hire provisions on this project is the Urban Jobs Task Force and their leader, Decca Danzel. The other community organization is the ACLU, the Syracuse chapter of the ACLU. They have been laser focused on the housing and the health disparity aspects of both the highway and the housing development, and under the leadership of Lynessa Chaplin. And now, last but certainly not least, another partner in this whole family of us working together with you, the community, is Dover Kohl. And as we looked at the potential for redevelopment, as the highway, the viaduct particular, but the new interchanges happen north and south on the area that runs through the city of Syracuse, we began to ask our questions of, as we pose options to the DOT, what are the design and project goals and opportunities for our community from a design perspective that we can have a clear picture about. And so we let out an RFP, and we are so pleased to have the Dover Kohl team with us to talk about how they're going to be moving forward when it comes to what are design goals, project goals, what is best for this community, and how they are going to work with all of us to engage you in this process. And with that, I will turn the mic over to Josh. Or Victor, I probably got that wrong.
I'm happy to start. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. My name is Victor Dover. I'm the town planner and urban designer. Well, first, by way of introduction, our town planning and urban design firm was founded in 1987, so we've been doing this for a while. And what we do for a living is we help cities and towns get down on paper the details of their vision. And not just a few words or bumper sticker phrases, but really all the details that will make the difference on how things turn out for quality of life in the community. So we've been grateful for the chance to work all around the country and sometimes abroad on these kinds of tasks. But now the City of Syracuse, as Deputy Mayor Owens was describing, hired us to document and refine what they call the community vision for the greater neighborhoods around the I-81 corridor that will all be affected by the freeway removal and its replacement with the community grid. I'm going to zoom out for a minute so you can meet some more of our folks. I get to work with an amazing, talented group of people. I can't wait for everyone in Syracuse to meet them. I've asked a few of the thoughtful designers and planners to sit in on our conversation today as part of getting us all up to speed on what Josh and I have been learning about how best to help Syracuse. So I do want to make a note. We're working for the city, not for New York State DOT or the federal government or someone else. So as Syracuse citizens, we're working for you. That's who we're working for. And that's really because the city leadership realized, and I think Deputy Mayor, you described this very well, that urban design is bigger than just transportation. That city building is bigger than just engineering. Now, I also want to say we're sensitive to the fact that city planning and big infrastructure projects have in the past been tools for either inadvertently or sometimes deliberately inflicting harm on communities. And in the urban renewal projects of the middle of the 20th century, for example, those tools, city planning, big infrastructure, were used to reinforce division and frankly, to suppress people. That's a very bad history, and we're sensitive to that fact. It's really all about change. But city building done right can also be healing and restorative. It requires us to focus our attention up front on equity and inclusion and community benefit so that the changes and repairs that you set in motion, I think you're demanded that they become a great example for the 21st century. So change that makes things better. That really starts with a clear vision. And it's been pointed out to us that at a very high level and in a zoomed out way, that in Syracuse has been painstakingly worked out already. Your community doesn't not need us to come in and help figure out that big picture. Your community knows. You've decided at the local and the state and federal levels, the freeway will be removed and replaced with the community grid. So in the big picture, that's already set. Now we need to focus on the details. And we can help with this. Street design, for example, I'm fond of saying is too important to be left to the traffic engineers. We realize that folks in the surrounding neighborhoods are pretty fatigued with planning and consultants and duplication of efforts. I think you've gotten as far as you have because you've been all in. You've gotten to the point where there's this record of decision on the big picture, and we get that. So I'm urging you to think of this new work that we're starting now with you as a chance to go to a deeper, hopefully newer level of meaning in that work. And I will also share with you that for a long time, I've come to realize that consensus building and community engagement aren't a one-time thing. They have to be sustained, but it is worth it. Here's why it's worth it. When the community speaks with a unified voice, government at all levels can listen and learn, and then everybody is better off. And that, I think that's what Syracuse is having us work on here. So it's worth talking a little bit about where this fits into the national picture. Since we travel around and we work on projects like this at different stages in many states, I want to make sure you realize that you're the new leaders of the pack in Syracuse. You've gotten farther and you've gone there faster than many of your peer metro areas that are working on something similar. All eyes are on Syracuse. This is really a national occasion in the movement to tear down and replace what our Congress for the New Urbanism calls freeways without futures. That movement has a very long history, but there have been some key moments that are worth reflecting on for a second. You know, before the Embarcadero, which was the busy waterfront expressway in San Francisco, was knocked down by an earthquake about 30 years ago, it was probably hard to imagine life in that region or getting around there, for example, without it. And people thought it was necessary. But as it turned out, replacing the elevated freeway with a boulevard at ground level was one of the best things that ever happened to San Francisco. Traffic works fine. The value of all the surrounding real estate rose. Quality of life improved. And the city went from being cut off by its transportation system to reconnected by it. And then, you know, similar stories, if you look this up, have been unfolding in Portland and in Milwaukee, and now lately even in Rochester and Niagara Falls. And many other cities like Oakland and Dallas, they have ambitious freeway removal plans in the works. Now, Josh will tell you why this is not just about removing stuff, but about what we add. So I'll leave that for Josh. But it's become such an important movement that the states and the federal government are putting money into this via the Department of Transportation's Reconnecting Communities program and other efforts. So what I'm saying to you is we sense that getting it right in Syracuse is important for Syracuse, but it's also of national importance. And that's my starter for how I'm thinking about this. I want to introduce my friend and teammate, Josh Frank. Josh is a remarkable, thoughtful urban designer, and he's the project director for our firm's effort in Syracuse. Now, not coincidentally, apart from what he does when he's working at the job, he's also the volunteer local leader of an effort to replace a failed freeway in Tampa with their own version of a community grid. And he's been an advisor to those folks in New Orleans and in Duluth and other cities who are working on similar things. Josh?
Well, thanks, Victor. And it's nice to talk to everybody here today. I think this is an incredible opportunity, not just for us and for me, but for everyone here on this panel and everyone participating and attending virtually. Victor's right. This is the moment for Syracuse in this lifetime, and perhaps for the next future couple lifetimes for our kids, for grandkids, and essentially answering the question of what Syracuse is going to be when it grows up. This is a huge opportunity to affect change in a way that every city around the country is going to be, wishing they had and working towards in the future. So it's really an honor, not just for me, but for all of us. As Victor mentioned, this is more than just a project for me and for our team. For me personally, it's a huge passion. I actually arrived at urban design in a lot of ways through the campaign to remove the highway here in Tampa. It's something that at one point, I worked as a consultant for the Florida Department of Transportation through a university process and learned, the process of how that gets implemented for freeway expansion, and totally fell out of favor with it. And that has led me to the career that I've had in the specialty of removing freeways, which is, I think, the biggest chance for every city to get things right in the next century. So it's really an incredible opportunity both for me and for everybody here. In addition, I think, as Victor mentioned, Syracuse is on the front lines for this type of project, and not just in a professional or academic setting, but in everything from the federal funding conversation that's happening right now to the programs and initiatives set up by the U.S. Department of Transportation under Secretary Buttigieg. This is the forefront of what everybody in transportation and city planning right now is focusing on. It's I've said before to the deputy mayor and others that this is not a road project. It touches every aspect of city governance, of health and welfare, and the quality of life for citizens in any proximity to a freeway. And so, it's a lot more complex than your standard, road project. So that's why I think it's incredibly valuable for the city to, bring us into the project, to have somebody who's willing to put those needs and that lens on the project rather than focusing solely between the right-of-way lines and what happens with asphalt and concrete. Those things are important. It's definitely a part of the project, but it's not the entire project. City making is really our focus. So for Syracuse and for this project, our immediate focus right now is we're just getting started. Victor and I had the great pleasure of visiting Syracuse a couple weeks ago and meeting with elected officials, getting a lay of the land, starting to talk to the community and figure out where we need to be, who we need to engage. It was an incredible process. You have a lot to be proud of. In addition to the I-81 project, there's a lot happening in Syracuse, and it's really fantastic. So for us, that is really informative, that 2-day trip, that process of getting to know folks, because it helps us set up the next stages, which for this project is the Community Charrette. So as Victor mentioned, one of the things we left Syracuse sort of understanding is just the sheer amount of engagement that's happened over the past decade. It's a lot. You've been asked a lot of questions, both through the DEIS process and the FEIS process, all the way to the very beginning with the Congress for Urbanism's events that happened to set up the conversation as it is today. So we recognize that. We think that the community is ready for implementation and to start seeing what they're going to get out of this project rather than to just continue to answer the same questions. So for us, that means programming our charrette in a way that is as agile and as quick as we can be to gather as much feedback as possible and to create a very visual set of plans, diagrams, renderings, modeling to give folks an idea of exactly what it's going to look like. Not a technical report, not filled with spreadsheets and addenda, but something that's very visual that people can understand and recognize, even if they're to an untrained eye, for example. So that's our goal for the next essentially month, when we'll be setting up and eventually coming to Syracuse from August 21st to August 27th. So that full week, we will have a full contingent of folks in Syracuse, working in Syracuse, inviting the community to come sit at the table and draw with us, to talk to our team of experts, and really to help us create the vision at real time. We're very cognizant that we don't want this to appear as if we're gonna take information, go home, craft something, and then come back. This is very much done in an engaged process that doesn't happen just in that week in August, but several times afterwards, where we're coming back, we're representing, we're making sure we're going in the right direction, that we've heard you and not just listened. And so that I think is our next steps. The last couple of things I wanted to talk to are the fact that we feel very strongly that this is a project that needs to be not just a technical report, but very accessible. I've written the scope so that the final deliverable is a document that everyone can be incredibly proud of. As was mentioned, this is not a removal project. This is an added project. The freeway is going away, but in its place is a lot of really great things that the city is going to have, from the land that becomes available for development and all of that comes with that, to the amount of tree canopy that we're going to be bringing back to this part of the city, to the historical and the placemaking element of really building pride in some of these areas that maybe haven't seen a whole lot of investment in the past. So this is truly an additive project. It's not a freeway removal, not just a freeway removal. And then last but not least, I think as was mentioned, we're very cognizant that this is a very multidisciplinary type of project. City making takes a lot of hands, and we are very thrilled to have a incredible team of sub-consultants with us. I'm going to share my screen very quickly just to give you a sense of some of the folks you'll be seeing both in August and throughout the process. See if I can move my little side panel here. But this is us. And the last thing I want to mention is that we also recognize that the best type of plan and the most trust building and all of the things that we can do as consultants, we need to do with people who look like the community we're working in. And so we have very purposefully gone above and beyond to make sure that our team is representational. I am here, a white guy at a podium. I'm very aware of that. And so we're very purposefully making sure that this is a project that's not about us without us, as is common in projects like Victor had mentioned during the urban renewal period. So we very strongly want this to not be that. And so we will do whatever it takes to make sure that's not the case. But this is our project team. It's not just me, not just Victor. It's Dover Kohl Partners, Nelson Nygaard, our transportation engineering firm, SWBR for local architecture. They're in New York. Mark Wooters, who's also based in New York, worked on the removal of the Brooklyn-Queens Expressway. CH Planning, Foyt Albert Associates, which is also an engineering firm, and then Ideas in Action, which is run by Mark Norman, specifically for housing and anti-displacement strategies. So it's an incredible team. I'm very fortunate to say that all of these folks are folks that we've known either through this process or for beforehand that we've worked with, and highly respect all of them. So with that, I think I'll turn it back over to Deputy Mayor for Q&A, or Brian or Joe, whoever's next.
Thank you, Josh. We're going to move to Joe, but real quickly, I just want to, you brought up the point about, again, and I forget that I want to give my flowers, is the available land. And we've been, the City of Syracuse is clearly on the record that we want that land conveyed to us to be able to look and do with it what's in the best interest of our constituency. And again, at the forefront of the conversation has been the Syracuse ACLU proposing a land trust that the city signs off and agrees with that process and that idea and what was proposed to the DOT. And with that, we're going to bring on Joe Driscoll. I think officially, Joe, in your first public role as a City of Syracuse I-81 project director. Joe.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. This is my first airing in public. Yes, just started the job a few days ago. Yeah, the 81 project, before I even ran for office, this became a passion project for me. It became something that I really, I started a group called Community for the Grid in 2017 before I even took office as a councilor. For those of you who don't know me, I was a city councilor for 4.5 years. When I started learning about the history of how 81 was built the first time and the damage that was done to the city, advocating for the community grid became my passion, and I really just threw myself into it all the years that I was on the council. And through that, I developed relationships with loads of different partners and stakeholders who have been involved, NYCLU, folks in the community, the DOT, through those years, I've also developed relationships with all the folks in City Hall and state and federal government through my years there. So when this job became available, to me, it was a dream job, and I'm just so honored that the administration trusted me with it. So basically what I'll be doing as the city's project director, I'll be a communicator, a link between the different organizations, basically communicating with DOT frequently, seeing where they are with the project, different issues that are arising, relaying that information back to different department heads, DPW, parks, the infrastructure, the utility issues that are going to arise as they go into all these different streets. I'll be coordinating with the city and with DOT. And then my other job, the hiring of Dover Kohl, I was very actively involved as the transportation chair for the city, that RFP process. We kind of realized, from some communication with stakeholders in the city and the administration, that we were going to need some professional advice from folks who had done this kind of thing before and really help us navigate. And as Sharon said, really excited about Dover Kohl. They've been great so far, and we've jokingly said they literally wrote the book on this. So they're really knowledgeable. They've got some of the most relevant experience of anybody in the nation that could be working with us on this. So we're truly blessed to have them. So that will be another part of my role. We'll also be interfacing with Dover Kohl, going back and forth to the community, trying to get input from stakeholders, relevant partners, and basically relaying all that information between all the different organizations. And, I think we all know that this is going to be the most consequential and changing, character changing event to happen in Syracuse in our lifetimes. And I take that with the due responsibility that it has. And so I'm just really excited to be in this role. And I'll give it everything I've got, but I don't want to go on too long. I know we want to get to Q&A. So I saw there were some great questions in there, and I know there's a lot of information that folks want to get. But as well, when I was a counselor, all you had to do is call me or shoot me an email. That's still the situation. My email is jdriscoll@syrgov, like all the city folks. So any questions about 81, I'm here for the community as well. And that's a big part of my role, is to interact with the community, get questions, negotiate concerns. Right now we're dealing with Krause and Irving, looking at that and how that's going to roll out. And so taking the feedback from those businesses and stakeholders that are in that corridor, relaying that to DOT, relaying it to all the department heads is my role. So please, members of the community, know that I'm still a phone call or an email away if you have concerns and thoughts that you think need to be related to the project. And with that, I'll pass it back over for Q&A.
And again, that email is jdriscoll@syrgov.net.
I was trying to speed past that part, Sharon.
No.
I'll put it in the chat so you guys can have it.
We are going to move on to the part where we get to hear your questions. And Brian, you're ready to go here? Brian is going to moderate this section for us. Thank you.
Sharon, I'll add my thanks to you and all the panelists for being here, and the more than 100 people who took time out of their day to engage in this important issue. So thanks to you all for being here as well. We received a lot of questions in advance. Certainly, if you have questions, you're welcome to pose them now. We may not be able to get to them, but please feel free. We'll start perhaps with an easy one. A participant earlier on in the Q&A asked, just as I had the question yesterday when I heard the word charrette, for a definition. Victor, you were kind enough to put it in the Q&A, but if somebody doesn't mind explaining, we don't need the derivation, but what a charrette is. I know, Josh, you talked a bit about it in your remarks, but a little more just for those who didn't see the Q&A response.
Sure. So a charrette is essentially a fast-paced, quick set of dialogue where the folks at the table are working collaboratively to come to consensus. So it's really often about iterations of ideas, sometimes prompted with questions, sometimes not, where we can work to, get down to the very essence of what a question may be really quickly, and then do that repeated over a series of times. So typically that means, having a small group table of 8 to 10 people with a facilitator, where we're bringing in a lot of questions to try and get a lot of quick feedback. So that's sort of the charrette version definition of a charrette, where it's nice and quick. So hopefully that answers it.
It does. Yeah, thank you. Anybody else want to come in on that, or can we move on? All right, very good. Thank you, Josh. We had a question submitted in advance asking about plans, if there are any yet, or how we'll ensure that people from Syracuse and the neighbors destroyed by 81 get jobs on the multi-billion-dollar public works project. Would anybody care to speak to that?
Yeah, I will take that on. I mentioned this a little bit in the beginning when I was speaking. I give all credit to the Urban Jobs Task Force, because while many of us were having many different conversations around 81, they were focusing on ensuring that local hiring was a part of the opportunity for these projects. This is a whole session in and of itself, focus, if you ever want to think about that, because of all the work that has gone into this. And so prior to President Biden's infrastructure bill being signed into law, there was a program that had been stopped by the previous administration called the SEP 14. And it was a local hire project, pilot program implemented by President Barack Obama that did exactly that. Federally funded projects had a requirement of implementing within it goals and programs to train and hire local hire. And local hire meant zip codes impacted by the project. When it was removed, so went that opportunity. What we were preparing with the DOT, the city, the county, various stakeholders led by and with the Urban Jobs Task Force is preparing a SEP 14 application for this project. And then President Biden and Congress signed the infrastructure bill into law. And now that set aside requirement is not needed. What is critical about local hire is that those portions of what we've worked at, which is a 15% hiring requirement minimally for zip codes impacted by the viaduct. And that is not every, but virtually every zip code in the city and a couple of our neighboring communities, to ensure that those details are written into the contracts let out by the DOT. And so while we got to this phase to ensure that that language is agreed upon, what we are working on now is to ensure that language is embedded within the contracts in the DOT project.
Gotcha. Thank you. Anybody else want to come in on that point? All right, thank you. We had quite a few questions about specifics, right? And as we heard in everybody's remarks, we're not there yet about, entirely appropriate that people ask about the width of the sidewalks or, say specific streets. But we did have some that I thought might be worth at least talking in broad strokes about the use of green space. Is that something in advance? Are we still too far in advance to talk about that? Or is that something anybody could speak on now before you've really sort of rolled up your sleeves and dug in?
I'll start with just saying best practice is to start with the green parts, not try to find room for them after the fact, after all the other big decisions have been made. A classic example is in traffic engineering, to start with the center of the road where there are cars going back and forth and figure out how many lanes and how wide the lanes and so forth, and gradually add drainage and curbs and so on. And probably running out of right of way before you find room for street trees or sidewalks. And so what we say is it's really important for communities, especially with these surface streets where it's not just cars, but walking, biking, transit, addresses for business and addresses for homes, that these are things you start with. You start with the pedestrians, you start with the shade tree you might need for a tree-lined sidewalk, and you work your way out to solving for the other issues. If you try to add pedestrians and green at the end, you almost always find out that the space has been gobbled up by asphalt.
Just no room left. Huh?
So what I'm describing is best practices. And this is why we say that the community grid is more than a transportation project. You're really rethinking not just the corridors or inside the right of way, but rethinking the adjacent land uses, rethinking the building to street relationships. All those things are also part of green in the sense of sustainability.
Gotcha. Thank you. Would other panelists like to come in on that? Here's another one in broad strokes, again, accepting that specifics aren't, we're not quite there yet, but public art or the role of art, perhaps, even from a higher level best practice sort of standpoint. Are there plans to or hopes to, or, this is where you've done this in the past? Any thoughts on that?
Well, I think the answer is absolutely. In addition to thinking of the green parts first, we also think of the people parts first. So, all of that goes towards elements of placemaking, I'm sure you've heard that term before, where we're looking towards the folks who live there to help make things places that have either meaning symbolically or physically or historically, but also to create areas that are full of pride, that people can be proud of, proud to live in, proud to start a business in, proud to raise a family. And I think public art is a huge component of that. It's how we make our cities unique in a lot of ways, and how we differentiate civic spaces from non-civic spaces in a lot of ways. So that I would expect we're going to be looking at opportunities for that, as well as other ways to bring character into the vision plan.
In terms of best practices, it's customary for large efforts in public works to devote a percentage for public art. And that, of course, we'll have to get into the details of what that will mean. But at the high level, the thing to think of about this for now is that your street facilities and your public spaces are not just real estate or rights of way or just mechanisms for moving traffic, but they're really communications devices. What they're going to do is send a message to everyone who moves through the corridor, like a local citizen who needs to be inspired on their daily walk, or a visitor who is getting their first impressions of your place. These public spaces, the spaces between buildings, are where those messages get sent about what's important to your community and its culture and its history. So it would be a mistake to not include that aspect.
Gotcha. Thank you. We had quite a few questions. Sharon, you addressed it, I think, in your remarks at the top of our session about, and I'll bring it up again, clarifying some of the overlapping, right, the DOT plan, Blueprint 15, all the many other moving pieces which are related to, but separate from, but yet must be connected with the work here. Does anybody care to say a little more about delineation, specification of what we're talking about here today, as compared to some of the other things themselves very important, but how they differ? I think given the volume of questions we had on it, it'd be great if somebody could speak a little more to that topic, please.
So again, I'd be more than happy to start. I mean, one of the first things I said, one of the many first things I said with Dover Kohl, I think they regretted asking me questions, and I just kept hitting them with stuff. But one of the things we have to do is some material, written material, laying out who are all these people, and what is DOT doing? What is the City of Syracuse? Who do I call when I have a question for? Right. I think that that is critical to keep this wonderful opportunity. Josh, that's what I'm going to say during the whole next 3.5 years. This wonderful opportunity, straighten all of our minds of who is going to be responsible for what. Even in city government now, if there are the questions that people have, they'll call city because it's City Hall. But we want to be able, through Joe's office, to be able to get people to the right place to answer the right questions. And I think that will start with some communication tools that I'll be talking to Joe about, whether it's dashboards or whether it's a phone directory, and definitely written materials to sort out who all these folks are.
Gotcha. Joe, did you want to come in on that? You're on mute.
No, I think Sharon, that's it. Just trying to get all that information out there is going to be a priority,
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, it seems like the job is big enough, but you also have to dovetail with and coordinate with lots of other. I mean, it's important work, and it should be covered by many different plans, but it does seem a large challenge. Can I ask the folks from Dover Kohl how this compares in terms of the overlapping other pieces where your work fits into others? Is there anything you can, I've been here 30 years. I don't have a good sense of the on the ground sort of workings of other communities. Is this, boy, this is how it always happens, or no, Syracuse is completely different, or somewhere in between?
Well, I think there's a couple points. One is that every place is unique. So it's always challenging to try and, coordinate everything from the bike and ped plans to the, future land use ongoing efforts. Every element of the city, it typically has either an existing plan or one ongoing that is part of what we look at is how to incorporate all of those into a larger vision. That's part of why the focus is on the picture of the puzzle box first before we start assembling all the pieces. So that way we can always have that in the back of our minds when we look to, for example, a bike and ped plan. We're able to then see it through that lens. I think that's the first part of that answer. The second part is this is also a little bit new in terms of freeway removal. New York State has only done a couple, so it's not like there's a massive backlog of historical examples on how intergovernmental relations can work on these sorts of things. So it's a little bit of a creative process every time to make sure that the relationships are there. And so a lot of the legwork that we've done thus far under our contract with the city is talking to staff about what they're working on, getting information on previous and completed projects, for example, so that way we can have as much information as possible to inform the larger vision. So that's the short answer of basically a very complex type of project that's not just one sort of element of governance. It's multi-jurisdictional, sometimes even up to the federal level and down to the local level. So it's complex, but it's something that like I said, every project is different and complex in its own way. So this is not something that's not overcomable. It's just sometimes it takes a little bit of time and effort to figure out the right way to do it.
Gotcha. Thank you. Anybody else? Can I move on to another question? All right. Just an aside, we had a few people post things in the Q&A. Will there be a summary report of this with questions and answers? I'm not sure if that person was referring to our session here. We are recording this and we will post very soon, early next week, the recording of this session on our website. So you all, and certainly anybody else in the world with access to the internet, can view this. So hopefully that is some use to others who couldn't make it today.
And Brian, for the project, there will be one as well. We're going to be having like I mentioned, a very highly digestible, not very technical takeaway report at the end, which is going to hopefully be something that anybody and everybody can have and understand, either physically or digitally. And as well, we'll also be putting an action plan together as a separate chapter, more or less, for how to accomplish all of the items we'll be showing in the vision plan.
Gotcha. All right, great. Thanks, Josh. We had another group of questions, series of questions. I may be conflating some things that don't quite go together, but I'll do it anyways for the sake of brevity. Questions about health. How do we protect people's health, both in the improvements that are added and during the work itself? I think somewhat relatedly, how do we make sure that what comes next is friendly for people with disabilities, right? That down to curb cuts to more broader sort of tactical things. Would anybody care to speak on that, either from a high level or even, I know we're not at specifics yet, but anything you care to say would be
Brian, for me, I'll just say that, again, the ACLU has been talking about health disparities historically from the elevated viaduct, still also talking about, as the community grid is built, what provisions will be made regarding even just, this new structure that we'll have close to people. Health disparities and disabilities. And I saw in the question, the amenity for this for children in our community as well. Those are all topic areas that we want our planning team to hear from you. As we are creating this opportunity for our community, we want to make sure that whether as individuals, I have a son who is differently abled as well. How will this impact him? Children, from birth to our wonderful young adults in this community, and the health disparities, ensuring that there is place for, we still as community have not recovered from the Labor Day storm. and our tree canopy and the benefits of trees, whether they are green or fruit trees. So really, we're looking for these are the questions that we're looking for in these charrettes. It is not more about the mechanics of a road. It is about the amenity of a community.
Well said. Thank you.
Absolutely, well said.
Joe, please.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, well, very well said, Sharon. And I just want to, reinforce what Sharon said about showing up to raise your voice in these situations, but that, I'm only a few days on the job, but I was grilling DOT this morning about exactly how that will work out and making sure that, dust and lead and all the, when they're doing that work is a top priority. That we'll be watching, and we're initiating a conversation right now with the county, the city, and state health departments to sit down and make sure everything is, going to be as safe and as healthy as can be. In general, the DOT stated that they will be slicing off sections and removing them quickly so that all the work will not be done on site. So some of the stuff that will be, taken apart will be taken apart off-site, so to avoid to minimize the dust and lead exposure that's a risk to the community. But that will definitely be a priority for me, and I know for many of our partners on this, it's something the conversations have already started, even though we're still a year out.
And I would
Brian, I might be just doing a little bit of your job, but Josh, please chime in. But Joe, also, a passion of yours has been our public transit system, and there's a question. I think a great tie into what we're talking about in the Q&A too. But Josh, I didn't want to cut you off.
That's quite all right. I think there's a couple levels of the health impacts that come with a project like this. One is obviously the deconstruction process itself and the impacts of that, which Joe has mentioned. There's also the bigger conversation about health in planning. So, typically we think of it the same way we think of the green parts, is that it's health in all policies, right? So having a more walkable grid, for example, is in and of itself a more healthy design, because folks are driving less. We're creating shorter trips, which create alternatives for walking and biking. And then last but not least, the sort of level of detail for making sure everything from crosswalks and intersections are ADA compliant. I promise you, my wife was a doctor of occupational therapy and pediatrics. There's not a project where I do not see things through that lens. And so for me, it's incredibly important. And I know for the rest of our team, it's something that we make sure is not just something that we think of, it's a standard, that's included in everything that we do.
Gotcha.
Sharon, I have a closing thought here about where we sit in history. Our profession, city planning, actually was born out of public health reform. If you go back to the 19th century industrialization and overcrowded, really toxic cities, city planning was born out of a progressive movement to do something about making the city a more healthful place. So that's our great tradition in the longest distant history. But that was often left forgotten when they weren't worrying much about the smog or the ultrafine particulates that were being breathed by people who were living next to these urban expressways in the middle of the 20th century. So we lost touch with that. And I think where we are in history now is a reconnecting to those roots in public health and fostering a culture of physical activity, like Josh described, and thinking about health in all respects. Now, there was also, it could be said that through that long history of city planning, whether it was 1870 or 1920 or 1950 or 1960, they weren't really doing a good job at all with thinking about equity or diversity or inclusiveness or environment. And so what do we need to do now for the 21st century? We need to do those things. So yeah, we need to connect to those public health roots and making the city a less toxic place, a healthful place. But we also need to do things they never really did well in the past that we need to do for the first time, really, which is build an inclusive and just city.
Gotcha.
Thank you, Victor.
Thank you. We're just about out of time, so I'll turn it back over to Bob.
Thank you, Victor. The closing statement, I think, was perfect. It deals with time and how health relates to social and complex other issues. Sharon, any last words? We're trying to, I think you've both done a great job at summarizing. I'll give you the chance. Would you like to say anything else at the end here?
No, there's just going to be so much time to say so
Yeah.
much more, but please participate in the
Yes.
charrettes. It's not just another asking you a bunch of questions. It's going to be interactive process. I had the pleasure at the invite of Bob to participate in a charrette. It is interactive. So please take in all of those voices about those specific stakeholder groups. Show up to one of those activities.
Excellent, excellent closing words. I want to thank Victor Dover and Josh, Frank and Joe Driscoll for sharing today, and certainly to Deputy Mayor Sharon Owens and to Brian for moderating some wide range of questions. I hope this has been an informative experience for everyone and encourage you to spread the news. You can hear what's going on here. We need to spread the news. We get to get people involved, for everyone to encourage and to participate in this planning and these planning events that are coming. Our city is poised, as Victor has said, and as Sharon has said, at another critical planning opportunity about to start. This design team needs all of our involvement to do their best work. That's what this design team is capable of, and for this city, it will be different. To do their best work, which is a vision to direct planning and development for generations to come. We will post this forum on the Focus website shortly at focussyracuse.org. Please spread the word that your other community folks who have missed this and you'd like to send it to friends and other organizations, please have them come to this site. Focus is able to make these opportunities available with the financial support of our community. You can easily make a donation, modest or otherwise, to our website again at focussyracuse.org. You can see the benefit here of communicating this as a communicating vehicle and then recording them. Thank you to all. We wish you all a great afternoon and a weekend ahead. Thank you so much.